Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to take a look at the brand new Artix set of 18 colors of gouache. Now, if this looks familiar to you, it's probably because you've seen me review the Hemi set of 18 colors of gouache in the past, and there are definitely similarities. They both come in a really handy plastic palette, which is nice and durable. If I'm going to have a plastic palette, I want it to be something that's going to last and going to be robust and refillable and useful. And I do like these palettes. I kind of wish they were white, but after using them, I think they would stain pretty bad, and that's probably why they don't do them in white. Although under the Hemi line, you can get a larger white palette, but I don't have that. I find with gouache, I really don't need that many colors. 24 seems to be a max that I would need in gouache. And I think the one they have that's a white palette is much larger than that. Maybe it's not. I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, the same company that sent me this set, and this was sent to me for review for free, just want to let you know, they also had sent me this one about a year ago when they released that. So first of all, the thing that I really liked about the set is that it came with a card with a swatch with pigment numbers. So you rarely ever find pigment information on any of these inexpensive sets of gouache. I don't know if I've ever seen inexpensive gouache with pigment numbers except for the Artix line of paints. They had pigment numbers on theirs, I'm pretty sure. So I think that's great because even if they don't offer light fastness information, like a light fastness rating on their work or on their product, you can kind of extrapolate how good the light fastness will be. Like if I look at this Naples Yellow, PY42 and PW6, okay, PY42 is very light fast, so I would think that would be fairly light fast. Now, one thing to remember with gouache is because it has so many opacifiers in it, and it usually contains quite a bit of white, titanium white, that those pigment particles of the colored pigment get spread out further and further. And in a product like a watercolor or a gouache, it doesn't have an oil or an acrylic binder to protect it. It is more susceptible to fading. So you also have to kind of consider the media as well as considering the pigment numbers when you're trying to determine how light fast it is. You can always do your own test by painting out a swatch, covering up half of it, and putting one half in the window so you can see how much it fades over a given time. I don't do that, but you certainly can. Some people do that online. It's really handy when they do. I don't know of anybody. This set's pretty new, so I don't think anyone would have a test on that. And I generally only see that for watercolor paints. But hey, if you want to be an entrepreneurizing YouTuber, you could do that. I'm too lazy. Yeah, I totally would forget that I left it in the window and totally forget to do a video updating it. But anyway, you've got all your pigment information. None of the pigments look really suspicious to me, although the deep red PR63.1, I'm not sure about that one. I'm not familiar with it. But the other ones look fairly customary and expected. So let's open her up. So it comes with this cute sleeve. I love the artwork on here. The Artix products definitely have this kind of like hip, young, graffiti type vibe. And I think it's just fun. And I think if it draws younger people into art, then that's wonderful. And the supplies that I've tried so far from the Artix line have been good quality. And I like that because I don't think the art has to be expensive. And I think, you know, you do want to get the young people started with quality supplies so they don't lose interest because the supplies are bad. So I'm going to set that aside. And just like the Hemi set of gouache, you've got these side latches. You lift it up. You got a lid. And then nestled into the lid is a mixing area. Now, when your paints are open and when they're full, you can get some paint on the lid when it's closed and sealed up. That's fine. You wipe it off, or you use a wet brush and you actually pick up the paint and use it. Not a big deal. And I noticed that the Artix paint versus the old Hemi paint, these are thicker than the old Hemi style of paint. So same price. I think they're all going for about 25 bucks a pop, a set on Amazon. But I like these because they're a little bit thicker. Now with the Hemi paints, I let mine dry out because when I got them and I used them, they just felt too watery to me. And that's kind of a complaint that I've had with a lot of student gouaches, is that they just have too much water in them. And I feel like I got to let them dry out and then use a wet brush to pick them up, and I feel like I get more opacity that way and I get a better user experience. So I've let mine dry out, the old Hemi ones, and I just spray them before I use them, and it just keeps it puts me in control on how much water I want to add to it and how thick I want it. I do the same thing with other gouaches. I'll show you my Artix box here. Just whenever you use gouache, if you ever decide to dry down gouache, make sure that whatever you put it in, that the wells will go to the ceiling, because you can see how it cracks. I even put some glycerin in here to help it from cracking, but I mean, they will dry and crack, and you can see some cracks here, but since the palette goes all the way up to the lid, I don't have to worry about anything cracking and falling out or getting mixed up and losing it. So I really like the palettes here for that design. And I just use a fish and tackle box for these Artix ones, and these are great. I use them all the time. It makes me more apt to use them because I don't have to open a tube and squeeze out paint. Now, I'm not going to let the Artix ones dry out because I find that right out of the pot, they are opaque enough and they are thick enough, and I don't have that issue that I have with other student gouaches. So I think they definitely improved the formulation with this set. So each of these, when you get a set of these, they're going to come with little foil lids. I flip the whole thing over on the table, and then I take them one at a time, peel the lid off. I scrape what I can from the lid back into the cup, and then I use whatever's left on the lid to make my swatch, just so I have a record. Now, I don't necessarily think you need to swatch your gouache paints because gouache, what you see is what you get. It's an opaque medium, and there's very little color shift. So what you're seeing in the pot is very close to what you're going to get on the paper. So I did do a swatch here. I'm going to set this out of the way. I'll try not to set my hands in anything here. I'll set that over to the side. I did a swatch, and I swatched the Artix gouache. Actually, go ahead. I swatched the Artix gouache here, and then I swatched the old Hemi gouache. Now, you got to keep in mind I had to spray the Hemi gouache and pick it up with a brush, so there could be some discrepancies in how it would have painted out if I had kept it fresh and wet in the box, which I didn't. So just kind of keep that in mind. And there is a different color palette. So if you had this set and you were considering this one, they do have different colors. Some are similar. The crimsons are a little similar. This one is a little bit more opaque than that one. The oranges are similar. That one's more yellow. That one's more red. You've got a warm yellow and a yellow ochre. In the Hemi set, you have a Naples yellow here. I feel like the old Hemi set is actually better for mixing, which is probably why it's a little more transparent, because the colors that are better for mixing have less opacifiers in them. They're more saturated color, so they're not going to have as much of a pastel tint to it. These have very, I would say, almost like fashion colors. You've got a large range of muted, desaturated pastel colors that are really pretty. And yeah, it kind of depends on what color range you like. I do think the quality is a little bit better with the Artix gouache. I think we want to do a little color mixing here, just like a little color wheel. Let me just grab a sketchbook. We can do that on some watercolor paper here. And let's see what we can get with those colors to see if that would be versatile enough for you to use as a main palette. Because 18 colors, you'd think you'd have enough to do some mixing. You want to anyway. I should probably take the palette out of the lid so I don't get any paint on the lid itself. I'm not sure I'm crazy about the bright yellow palette, but because gouache is opaque, then it does give you, you know, you can see what you're mixing. So I'm just going to grab my most primary colors. I'm going to grab some red. Probably don't need that much. Oh, I got a cat hair. What's new? Put some of that back. I gotta clean my brush between colors pretty good. So the downside of having all your paint open like this is that you really have to be careful you don't cross-contaminate your colors. We'll do a little bit of this Prussian blue here, because that's the most intense, or it's the most, I think it's the most primary blue, and we'll do a little of this lemon yellow. Put a little bit there so I can mix it a little bit. Okay, so let's mix that with a little bit of red. We'll see what kind of... Of course, I should have put my primaries on the palette first. I mean, on my paper first. Okay, so we got a secondary orange. Let me put my primaries down. This is crazy. This isn't how you do a color wheel. Okay, a bit of red in there. For yellow. You can mix it in there, get some tertiary colors. And we'll get our blue in there. We're going to need some more of the other colors. Ooh, that's a real pretty blue though, isn't it? Love that. I think we're going to get a really nice violet with that red. And if you're working on watercolor paper, you certainly could dilute it with water. I'm going to add some white gouache to it just so you can kind of see the tints. And we'll add a little more yellow. Oh yeah, really pretty. Yeah, no problem with color mixing. You got some primaries here, so you could definitely mix what you couldn't, what you don't have, and mix a lot of the colors that you would need. I mean, there's no bright magenta, so, but I think, you know, if you take some white, you could definitely get pinks and whatnot. Let me just kind of get a bunch of white in the center there, and we can pull the color into them. I'm going to get a little bit, I'm going to do get some fresh, I'll do some fresh white and red just so it doesn't get too muddy. Yeah, that's totally fine with the tints. That makes a really good color wheel. No shame in that game. So I'm pretty impressed with this. I'll show you a little painting I did with it. I like it. I think it's going to meet most of your needs. I'm probably going to try to scrape some of that color back in the wells. I took too much. A little goes a long way. But yeah, I like this a lot more than the original Hemi gouache. I find that it's more opaque. That I love that they have pigment numbers because I didn't in the old Hemi sets. Maybe they now have them, but when I got mine a year ago, it didn't. So I think that is awesome. I love it when companies are fully transparent with what's in their products. And I like that it comes with two whites. It comes with a white and a titanium white. It seems like one of the whites is a little bit warmer and one is a little bit cooler, but it's almost imperceptible. Like that one, which would be white, looks a little bit warmer than the titanium white. If I wasn't doing a review and I was doing this just for my own personal painting, I would only open one of the whites now and I would leave one closed because I don't think there's enough difference. They're both pretty opaque. I don't think there's enough difference to need both of those open at once, and I think it would save you quite a bit of heartache in case you get them kind of mixed up or anything. I don't think they're different enough to really affect your mixes. That's just my opinion. Maybe you can see that subtle difference, but I think once you're mixing it out, you're not really going to notice a subtle difference between that. They're both the same pigments. They're both PW6, so they're both titanium white pigments, so it's not like, I don't know. I don't know why they're different because they don't look very different to me. So they mix good, the color selection's nice, they're opaque, they're inexpensive, and they give us pigment information. So there's a few things that a lot of gouaches don't give you in the student range. And I'm calling them a student range because the price, it's 25 bucks, you know, 18 colors, that's really inexpensive for 30 milliliters of paint. Oh, 30 milliliters, that's how big those cups are. Just for reference, this is a 15 milliliter tube, so it'd be like 2 of these tubes in each one of those rectangles of paint. So just to give you a little bit of a size comparison, and I can show you a 5 milliliter tube. I know I have one somewhere. Oh, good grief. Is this 5 here? Yeah, this is a 5 milliliter tube. So just to show you, so there would be like 6 of these little tubes in one of those. So it's a decent amount of paint. I think it's a good value. I really do. So I was just messing around with this paint, and I had taken some photos when I was walking in the woods yesterday of this little plant that was growing everywhere. It looks kind of like the leaves look like a hosta, but then he's got these little white flowers on them. They're just really pretty, and they just grow wild everywhere. And it worked great. I could very easily cover over the green paint with the layer of white paint. I could add water for more flow. I found that I do need to add some water to this paint because it is that thick, unless I'm just doing like a highlight. It worked really well with my Taklon brushes, like my Zen and Menta All Media brushes, which I like to use for acrylic. You can use whatever brushes you like for acrylic. I don't think watercolor brushes would be stiff enough to really push the viscosity of this paint around, but it's not going to hurt your watercolor brushes unless you're like, I wouldn't use my watercolor brushes on my dried down gouache because you kind of have to dig a bit to loosen it up, but for the loose paint like this, it won't hurt hurt them. I don't think they'll give you the best performance unless you happen to use the golden Taklon brushes for your watercolor work. I think I did some other doodly things with that paint. Let me look. Pretty sure I did. Oh, I was just fooling around and just did some little one-stroke leaves and some silly little brush strokes. And yeah, it worked really well. Nice and creamy. There was no separation. Very homogeneous paint. I definitely recommend it. I don't think you can go wrong for that price for a set of gouache paints, and I really like the quality of the plastic. If you used up a paint, apparently you can buy these open stock overseas, because I've seen other reviews of very similar paints. I think when I did the Himi one, people said they were from Korea and they ordered them online, or AliExpress might have them in individual pots, but I don't know. Shoot. I threw away the wrappers. Let me see if I can find a wrapper here. That's what the wrapper looks like. Yeah, I don't know how you would even reorder. Let me get another one, see if there's any different markings or a number or something. They all have the same names and stuff on them, so I don't know how you would get the color that you needed. But that's a lot of paint. It'll take you a while to get through it. And honestly, probably if you're ordering them individually, you'd spend way more than just rebuying a set for the colors you needed. Or just buy a tube of gouache by, upgrade. Get Holbein, get M. Graham, well, I don't know if Winsor & Newton's is upgrade, because I don't think they're light fast. I would go with Schmincke or M. Graham. Personally, and then you could slowly build up an artist quality set once you get the hang of using gouache, because I really don't find there's that big of a difference between the usability of a student grade gouache and an artist grade gouache. I think it's more comes down to what the pigments are and the quality of the the pigments used, not so much the usability of it. I definitely recommend these. I think that if you've been curious about gouache, give them a try. I do find them a little bit more opaque and a little bit higher qualities than the other student grade gouaches I've used. Not that if you have a set of Artix gouache, which I really like too, if you have the old Himi set and that's suiting you fine, no need to run out and buy this, but I do think that if you're trying to decide between the two, I would definitely go for this. I love the palette, yeah, it's definitely a winner. Thank you so much for watching. Please give me a thumbs up before you go. And until next time, happy crafting.